On July 25, 2024, in the sweltering heat of a private airfield in El Paso, Texas, two of the Sinaloa Cartel's most powerful figures found themselves face to face, across from all expectation, with the agents of U.S. justice. Ismael El Mayo Zambada, who had ruled the cartel from the shadows for nearly 4 decades, was taken into custody, ending a criminal career built on loyalty, secrets, and silent dominance. But whispers claimed this wasn't capture, it was betrayal. A trap set by his own blood. Joaquín Guzmán López, son of El Chapo, had allegedly lured El Mayo into American hands. Almost immediately, Sinaloa erupted. A blood-red fallout. Urban and rural territories once unified under one banner splintered into two, the iron-fisted Mayo led by loyalists of El Mayo, and the brash, uncompromising Los Chapitos, El Chapo's sons. By September 2024, dozens lay dead, hundreds disappeared, roads blocked by flaming trucks, schools shuttered, civilians cowering in fear as cartel gunmen carved new borders with bullets. This was no ordinary cartel conflict, it was a civil war. A war between generations. Between pragmatism and recklessness. Strategy and recklessness. Meanwhile, far from the open chaos, the U.S. justice system advanced. El Mayo would not just face prison, he would plead guilty. Millions of dollars, decades of coercion, bribery, and blood on his hands, all to be laid bare in a Brooklyn courtroom. He offered an apology, an acknowledgement of ruined lives on both sides of the border. But in admitting guilt, he also triggered the unforgiving machinery of justice. A $15 billion forfeiture, an empire's ransom. With El Mayo out of the shadows, or so everyone believed, Los Chapitos stepped up. But they didn't emerge into peace. Instead, they ignited a territorial war that would paint Sinaloa's roads with fear, blood, and new loyalties. But this story is just beginning. The map has been redrawn, with invisible front lines, hidden deals, and a waiting reckoning. Stay with me, because what comes next is deeper, bloodier, and more revealing.
You are watching True Crime Cartel Originals. Before we dive into today's story, I've got one small favor to ask. If you love deep, real stories like this, tap the like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment below telling us which city you're watching from. It helps more than you know, and it allows us to keep bringing you stories no one else dares to tell. Now, let's get into the story.
This is not just a story of blood and bullets. It is the tale of two legacies colliding, one shaped by silence and shadows, the other by fire and spectacle. A battle between the last great ghost of Mexico's narco era and the unruly heirs of the most notorious kingpin of all time. Tonight, we dive into the empire of Sinaloa. How it was born, how it thrived, and how betrayal and ambition are ripping it apart. This is El Mayo versus Los Chapitos, the cartel split that redrew Mexico's map. To understand the war, we must begin where the shadows first stretched. In the rugged mountains of Sinaloa, where dusty roads wind into forgotten villages, and the only law that mattered was the one enforced with a rifle. It was here that Ismael Zambada Garcia, better known as El Mayo, rose quietly through the ranks. Unlike others who bathed in headlines, Mayo never sought fame. He thrived in the background, a strategist, a survivor, a ghost who walked among narcos but rarely left footprints. By the 1980s, Mayo was already moving shipments of marijuana and heroin north, crafting alliances, bribing officials, and earning a reputation as the man who could keep things calm when chaos threatened to explode. Then came Joaquín Guzmán Lora, El Chapo. If Mayo was the quiet ghost, El Chapo was the storm. Together, they built the Sinaloa Cartel into an empire stretching from Colombian jungles to the streets of Chicago. But where Mayo calculated, Chapo flaunted. One thrived by staying invisible, the other chased the legend of Robin Hood, escaping prisons, building tunnels, becoming a household name. And in that difference, the seeds of rivalry were quietly sown. For decades, it worked. One empire, two giants, countless lieutenants beneath them. But fate has a way of cracking even the strongest foundations. And when Chapo fell, the world assumed Mayo would naturally inherit it all. Instead, El Chapo left behind something far more dangerous, his sons. young, reckless, and eager to prove they were more than their father's shadow. They were Los Chapitos. And in the silence that followed El Chapo's capture, a storm began brewing. A storm that would force Mayo, the ghost, to step out from the shadows and face the most unpredictable enemy of his life, his old partner's bloodline. February 2014. Mazatlan, Sinaloa. In a modest beachfront condominium, a storm of boots thundered up the stairwell. Navy commandos burst through the door, weapons raised. And inside, they found the man who had eluded capture for over a decade, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. For the world, it was a triumph. For Mexico's government, a showcase of strength. But for the Sinaloa Cartel, it was the beginning of a silent earthquake. Their most public leader was finally in chains. Still, Chapo's legend had one more chapter. In 2015, from a maximum security prison, he vanished again. This time, through a mile-long tunnel, complete with lights, rails, and a motorcycle engineered for escape. The world laughed, the government blushed, and the myth of El Chapo grew even larger. But within the cartel, whispers spread, the escape had been too flashy, too costly. The kind of chaos Mayo had always avoided. By January 2016, the storm ended. In a bloody raid on a safe house in Los Chapitos, Guzmán was dragged from a sewer tunnel, battered, humiliated, and finally extradited to the United States. His reign was over. For Mayo, the fall of his longtime partner was both a relief and a curse. Relief, because the noise was gone. Curse, because Chapo's sons were still out there, hungry, ambitious, and unwilling to bow to the old ghost in the mountains. In the shadows of the cartel, the balance shifted. Mayo, cautious and disciplined, became the de facto elder statesman. But Los Chapitos saw something else, an opportunity to seize the throne their father had lost. And while the world celebrated Chapo's capture, a deadlier question began to take shape: who would truly inherit the empire? The ghost, or the bloodline? The answer would not come through elections or meetings. It would come through bullets, betrayals, and a spectacle that stunned the entire world. A day when a city of 1 million people became a battlefield. October 2019. Culiacan. The day Mexico surrendered. And the day Los Chapitos revealed just how far they were willing to go. October 17, 2019. It began like any other Thursday afternoon in Culiacan. The sun was hot, the streets crowded, children walking home from school. But by 2:30 p.m., the city would be unrecognizable. A secret operation was underway, and the target was Ovidio Guzmán López, son of El Chapo. Mexican special forces, armed with American intelligence, surrounded a modest house in the Tres Rios neighborhood. Inside, they found him, Ovidio. Young, calm, wearing a cap. For the government, it was victory. For Los Chapitos, it was war. Within minutes, the city erupted. Convoys of cartel gunmen flooded the streets. Pickup trucks mounted with machine guns, rocket launchers on their shoulders. Roadblocks on every major avenue. Culiacan, a city of over 1 million, was under siege. Civilians cowered in panic. Parents grabbed children as gunfire cracked through neighborhoods. Shoppers abandoned carts in supermarkets, running for cover. Schools locked their gates as terrified teachers shielded students from stray bullets. The cartel blocked highways with burning buses, seized control of intersections, and even stormed a military housing unit where soldiers' families lived. The message was clear: release Ovidio, or the blood of innocents would flood the streets. The government had captured Ovidio, but could not hold him. Outnumbered, surrounded, their families threatened, soldiers received an unthinkable order from Mexico City: let him go. In real time, the Mexican state surrendered to the Sinaloa Cartel. Cameras caught the moment, convoys pulling back, gunmen celebrating, civilians left trembling in a city still echoing with gunfire. For Los Chapitos, it was proof. Proof they were untouchable. Proof they could outgun, outmaneuver, and outlast the government itself. Their message spread across the world: Sinaloa belonged to them now. But not everyone celebrated. For Mayo Zambada, the ghost in the shadows, this was recklessness at its worst. The kind of spectacle that drew heat from every direction. And Mayo knew, what burned brightest often burned out fastest. The Culiacanazo was not just a victory. It was a warning. A line had been crossed, and a storm was gathering. Because if Los Chapitos were willing to bring Mexico to its knees for their brother, what would they do for absolute power? After the chaos of Culiacan, Mexico returned to a tense silence. On the surface, the Sinaloa Cartel looked united. But beneath the calm, a fracture was spreading. One half led by a ghost who had survived for 50 years. The other, by heirs who believed the future belonged to them. For Mayo Zambada, discretion had always been survival. He dealt in cocaine, heroin, and alliances. For Los Chapitos, the business of the future was fentanyl, a synthetic drug more potent, more profitable, and far deadlier than anything before. The Chapitos pushed production hard. Labs deep in Sinaloa churned out thousands of pills a day. Mayo's old guard resisted, calling it reckless, too visible, too dangerous. And with every disagreement, the split widened. The generational divide grew sharper. Mayo was discipline, patience, old school. The Chapitos were brash, violent, unpredictable. Where Mayo bribed officials quietly, the Chapitos flaunted convoys and power on social media. By 2020, whispers of betrayal spread. Disappearances in Sinaloa, commanders executed in quiet alleys, bodies dumped along highways. Each side suspected the other. But no one dared speak the truth aloud. The cartel was at war with itself. The United States intensified pressure. DEA operations targeted Chapito's fentanyl empire, while rumors swirled that Mayo was secretly passing intelligence to shield himself. Whether true or not, trust inside Sinaloa began to rot. All the while, Mayo remained invisible. No photos, no arrests, no videos. Just whispers of an old man somewhere in the Sierra Madre, pulling strings. For the Chapitos, this silence was intolerable. To them, silence meant weakness. By 2021, the fracture became violence. In Sonora, Baja California, and Durango, clashes erupted between gunmen loyal to Mayo and those loyal to the Chapitos. Mexico's map, once controlled by a single banner, was being redrawn with blood. For civilians, the nightmare returned. Entire towns became war zones. Families vanished. Streets were blocked with burning cars. The government looked powerless once more, caught between shadows and airs. But the fracture was about to burst into the open. In 2023, Mexico would see another city descend into chaos. Another chapter in a war that refused to stay hidden. And this time, the world was watching. It was just after dawn, January 5, 2023. Jesus Maria, a quiet town outside Culiacan, was still asleep when soldiers surrounded a house. Inside was Ovidio Guzmán, El Ratón, the Chapitos' most visible face. What happened next would echo across the world. Gunfire erupted. The army captured Ovidio alive. But within minutes, the city transformed into a battlefield. Los Chapitos unleashed chaos, convoys of gunmen flooding the streets, helicopters shot at, prisons breached, entire families trapped in the crossfire. Residents called it the Second Culiacanazo. Planes were hijacked, runways attacked, even civilian airplanes were fired upon as cartel soldiers tried to free Ovidio. For hours, Culiacan was at war again, one side in uniforms, the other in sneakers and masks. But this time, the government didn't back down. Ovidio was taken away under heavy guard, flown out of Sinaloa, leaving the Chapitos wounded, humiliated, and furious. For them, this was not just a loss, it was a message. The fracture inside the cartel deepened further. Whispers spread that Mayo himself had allowed Ovidio's location to be leaked. Others said the Chapitos had grown too reckless, drawing too much heat on the entire organization. In the months after Ovidio's capture, the violence didn't stop, it shifted. Assassinations in Sonora, ambushes in Baja, disappearances in Durango. Each attack whispered the same truth: Mayo and Los Chapitos were fighting a war the world could barely see. For civilians, nothing changed. Whole towns became prisons of fear. School buses turned around under gunfire. Farmers paid taxes not to the government, but to whichever side held their valley that week. Meanwhile, the Chapitos doubled down on fentanyl. The DEA called them the biggest traffickers of the drug flooding into the U.S., fueling an epidemic of overdoses. Billions in profit, and endless blood, at stake. Mayo stayed silent, unseen. The Chapitos broadcast their rage with fire and gunpowder. The old ghost against the young wolves, each believing the future of Mexico belongs to them. But no one, not even the government, can predict who will outlast the other. And so the question remains. Who will survive Mexico's most dangerous betrayal? The ghost who has never fallen, or the sons who refuse to kneel? The war for Sinaloa is far from over, and its ending may redraw the map of an entire nation. January 5, 2023. Dawn breaks over Jesus Maria, a quiet farming town in Sinaloa. The locals wake to the sound of roosters, but within minutes, the air fills with something else entirely, gunfire, heavy and unrelenting, echoing like thunder across the valley. The Mexican military has launched a daring raid. Their target, Ovidio Guzmán Lopez, son of El Chapo, leader of Los Chapitos, and one of the most wanted men on the planet. Soldiers move in with armored vehicles, Black Hawk helicopters, and drones circling overhead. What follows will become one of the bloodiest urban battles in Mexico's recent history. Gunmen loyal to the Chapitos unleash chaos. Convoys of sicarios pour into the streets, wielding .50 caliber rifles and belt-fed machine guns. The town transforms into a battlefield. Civilians dive for cover as bullets shred through walls, cars, and windows. Nothing is safe. The battle is so intense, even the skies aren't safe. Helicopters circle low, firing back at cartel positions. The roar of miniguns shakes the ground. For hours, Jesus Maria is locked in a siege, the kind of fight few towns could ever survive. By the time the smoke begins to clear, the death toll climbs into the dozens. Cartel gunmen lie scattered across the streets, vehicles burned out, homes riddled with bullet holes. But in the midst of this storm, Ovidio is captured. For the Mexican government, it is a triumph, a high-profile arrest that had eluded them once before. But for the Chapitos, it is a humiliation. Their leader, taken alive, flown out under maximum security. Their power, shaken. But whispers spread quickly. Was this really a victory of strategy, or the result of betrayal? In the world of the Sinaloa Cartel, nothing happens by chance. Some began to ask, who gave up Ovidio? Rumors point to Ismael El Mayo Zambada. At 75, the old kingpin has built his empire on survival. He knows the Chapitos are reckless, loud, and dangerous. By feeding intelligence on Ovidio's location, Mayo could weaken them without firing a single shot. If true, this was not just a betrayal, it was strategy. By cutting the head of the Chapitos snake, Mayo reminded everyone who still controlled the chessboard. Old power striking against new blood. But in the cartel world, betrayals are never the end. They are the beginning of something darker. And if El Mayo truly played his hand in Ovidio's downfall, then this was the ultimate betrayal. The smoke of Jesus Maria may have cleared, but the war for the soul of the Sinaloa Cartel is far from over. Today, Mexico's underworld looks different. Divided. Redrawn. And more dangerous than ever. On one side, El Mayo Zambada, the ghost, the survivor, the invisible hand that has guided the cartel for nearly 5 decades. His strongholds, rural Sinaloa, Durango, and the mountain corridors that funnel drugs north. Old routes. Old loyalties. On the other side, Los Chapitos, the sons of El Chapo. Young, flashy, brutal, and unpredictable. They control the plazas that matter most for today's drug trade, urban hubs, international ports, and the booming fentanyl labs churning out poison by the ton. Fentanyl. The drug that has rewritten cartel economics. Just a few milligrams can kill. And the Chapitos are accused of flooding the United States with it, fueling a crisis that claims over 100,000 American lives each year. Washington watches closely. Each arrest, each killing, each whispered betrayal across Sinaloa echoes in D.C. and beyond. The U.S. has placed multi-million-dollar bounties on both Mayo and the Chapitos. But still, both factions move with impunity. And so the question becomes, who will outlast the other? Will the quiet shadow of El Mayo continue his reign, slipping through the cracks of every manhunt? Or will the Chapitos, heirs to El Chapo's bloody legacy, seize Mexico's future with ruthless ambition? History suggests power never lasts forever. But in Sinaloa, survival is measured not in years, but in betrayals. Mayo has survived them all. The Chapitos are learning fast. In the battleground, Mexico itself bleeds while they fight. Internationally, the stakes are higher than ever. Cocaine to Europe, meth to Asia, fentanyl to the United States. The cartel's war is no longer Mexico's war alone, it is a global shadow war, fought in silence, with profits measured in billions. One is a ghost who has survived for half a century. The others are heirs fighting to prove their father's bloodline is still supreme. But in this war, there will be no crown passed down, no throne waiting in the light. Only survival. And so we are left with a question no one can answer: who will win? El Mayo, the phantom king who has outlived them all? Or Los Chapitos, the new blood, unrelenting and merciless? The truth is simple, only time will reveal who outlasts the other. And so we return to where it all began. Culiacan. A city where gunfire once turned daylight into a battlefield, where families ran for cover, and where the myth of invincibility shattered under the roar of .50 caliber rounds. The chaos of that day was not a single battle, it was the prologue to a war without end. A war that divided the Sinaloa Cartel and redrew the map of Mexico's underworld. El Mayo. Los Chapitos. Names whispered with fear across Mexico. Names etched into history by blood and betrayal. Two visions of power. One, an old phantom who moves unseen, ruling from the shadows. The other, heirs of a fallen king, carving their empire with fire and fentanyl. And the people of Mexico? They live between them. Their cities, their streets, their families, caught in the crossfire of a cartel war that will not end with treaties, but with funerals. The war between El Mayo and Los Chapitos is not history. It is happening right now. Every night. Every day. In the mountains, in the labs, in the streets. And as history shows, in this war, the only certainty is blood. In the shadows of Sinaloa, the story is still being written. The ending has not yet been decided. The ghost of El Mayo still walks. The sons of El Chapo still fight. And Mexico still bleeds. If you want more true crime cartel stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Because this is just the beginning. Until next time, stay safe. And remember, the shadows of Sinaloa never sleep.